Hey guys, Max from MaksWerks here. As you can see, I got a Kawasaki ZX9R here in front of me. It's been a pretty decent accident. Compared to some of the other bikes that we've done, this bike was wrecked rather than just left sitting or whatever for a long period of time. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be addressing a lot of the issues that are going on with the bike in terms of getting it ready for resale. And like I said, this will be a little bit different because this bike hasn't been sitting for years and years and years. It's only been sitting for about 8 months, and most of the damage is primarily cosmetic. So some of the little things that we're going to be doing, we're going to be replacing the battery because it was broken in the accident. The previous owner tried to fix the bike himself. He got 54mm clip-ons for a 46mm bike. So as you can see, these are just dangling here at the moment. So I got clip-ons on order. The brake line was destroyed as well as the master cylinder connection bit. So we got new parts from Ron Ayers to fix that. And then we're going to be doing some general maintenance. The carbs need to be cleaned out. The bike needs to be tuned up a little bit. Some of the electronic needs to be rewired. And then we'll see if we can get it back on the road. So one of the things I get asked fairly frequently is about batteries. This is the busted battery I pulled out of this bike. It's a Deka glass mat battery. This is considered a fairly good battery, fairly quality unit. Runs you about $60 or $70. The battery I replaced it with is a cheapo unit from eBay. I pay between $20 and $30 for each of those cheapo batteries I get off of eBay. It takes about a week to get here. I will say this. I have been using them for about 2 years. There's a whole list of companies, Adventure Power, Time Trial, and some other crap. It's the same black battery, sealed battery, and they have different names printed on them based on who's selling them on eBay. But the thing is, I have never had one fail. Texas is a fairly temperate climate, and as a result, we don't have extremes. It doesn't get really, really cold. It does get really, really hot, but it tends to not affect batteries as much. Especially on a bike, but I use them all the time and they work great. If you want to spend $70 on a name brand battery, there's nothing wrong with that. However, for these bikes that I flip and sell, every dollar affects my margin, and as a result, I try to find the cheapest parts that are still quality and still work. And these eBay batteries work. I have one in my KTM, I have one in my Vulcan. Those are bikes that I own, that are mine, and I have never had an issue with them in any way. So I highly suggest doing that. The other thing I highly suggest is when you get an old bike like this and you pull out a dead battery like this, set it aside. Sometimes you need a battery and you don't have time to wait for shipping and you end up having to buy one locally. Pretty much every state has a recycling law, which means that this dead battery is worth $10 to $15. In recycling fees. So I always hang on to at least 1 or 2 dead batteries so that if I need to, I can just go and trade them in. Unfortunately, one of the annoying things about sports bikes is they have an underbody exhaust a lot of times, which makes jacking them up difficult. Also, so I thought we would, because I don't have the clip-ons yet, I thought we would focus primarily for now on getting the engine running. And much to my surprise, after I put the battery in, even without the choke, so there you go, the bike does run, but it chokes itself out when you give it gas. So that indicates to me that there's a carb issue, so we're going to get the carbs out and get it sorted out. So the gas tank in this bike is hard mounted. What that means is there's 4 5mm Allen bolts here. You got to remove all of them, pull the tank up. As normal, the fuel line needs to be replaced, and the fuel filter is right here. Fuel pump is right here. Since the bike runs, we're going to check the fuel pump, but I'm pretty sure that the fuel pump works. When you remove the tank, you have really good access to everything. Thankfully, the fuel petcock seems to work, at least marginally. So as you can see, I set the tank back up over there. And here you can kind of see what I'm talking about if I bring you in closer. Basically, the fuel petcock sits here. There's your fuel line. There's your fuel filter right there. There's your fuel pump. Here are all your carburetors and your airbox. We're going to take that apart and take a look, see what's in there, and then move on, see what's going on with the carbs. So to get the airbox cover off, you just remove these. These are all 10mm bolts. Just unscrew them and we'll see what's inside. So in here we got this foam filter type deal. It doesn't look too bad from this side, but if you flip it over you can see it's quite dirty. We're probably going to wash it out and reuse it because I don't want to spend the money to order a new one. But there's your airbox. Everything looks fairly intact. All the butterflies seem to be operational. These are vacuum-driven carbs. So now we're going to get this top cover off and see what's going on with the carburetors. So here's our fuel pump, and what we're going to do is we're going to just jump power to it, and you can hear that it's pumping just fine. So we're going to leave it alone. I was having some issues with it earlier, but we can leave it alone for now. A lot of the lines in the fuel filter need to be replaced. The other thing that we can check is we can plug this back in. And you can, well, you can't see it or hear it, but you can actually feel this fuel pump running when I hit the crank. So we know that the system on the bike is pumping fuel like it's supposed to be. Alright, so the next step here is removing the carburetors. There's a 3mm hex on top that holds the carburetors to the head. And then, so now you can see it's just moving around. There's two pipes. This is for the pair system. This is some sort of other vacuum system up here. And of course there's the throttle position sensor on the side. However, it's still secured on the bottom by the quick adjust idle. So that's basically two 8mm bolts that'll come out here in the bottom. And then once you take those out, you should be able to disconnect the throttle and pull the carburetors out. And like I said, this bike will actually start and run. And as a result, we're just going to go through the carburetors very generally. They're Can CVRs. So they're, if I remember correctly, they're fully they're not, basically not adjustable. And so we can just go through them and install them. Another thing is down here, these bolts are different lengths that hold the idle speed adjustment. The longer one goes closer to the motor. So my correction from earlier, these carbs are actually fully adjustable. Right here you can see. So we're actually gonna, you can see one of these is not in the same position. So we're going to actually figure out what the stock distance here is. And we're just going to basically take them apart one carburetor at a time, clean them out, and then before I install them on the bike, I'll get the fuel valve adjusted. The other thing that's missing is there's a screw supposed to be right here that slides with this choke, and it's missing and I don't have it. So here we can see the bowl is off. The gasket's still good. We might put a little bit of RTV on it. But here you can see this is badly oxidized. The floats are in good shape. But we'll take all this out and clean it, and then just put it back together. We're not going to modify anything. So as always, you got your main jet, you got your pilot jet, you got your fuel inlet rail, and then the screw that holds the floats in place. And you have your fuel air screw right up here. Now that we've taken care of the bottom of the carburetors, we can go through and what we're going to do is we're going to remove each of these caps and clean out the vacuum mechanism. Again, all you got here is just four Phillips screws. We're just going to pop them out. One of the things I highly recommend doing is when you're doing this, you want to be really, really careful with these Phillips head screws. What I like to do is I like to push down with my top hand and then basically rotate it by using this hand to keep it all as much pressure pointed down as possible. These carbs are actually in pretty decent shape and they seem to be coming apart pretty well. But it's just a good rule. A lot of carbs are a lot more difficult to take apart than this. Also, when you're taking off this last bolt here, remember that there's a spring under here, so it's going to be under a little bit of pressure. So there's the cap. Here's the spring. And there's this little seat for the slide. This little plastic seat for the slide. This is the spring seat. And this can actually come out if you need to change the needle. But since the needle is really clean, we're just going to clean out right in here. Just wipe through in here. And then we're going to reassemble it, and then we'll be done cleaning the carburetors. Now, we're putting everything back together. These uni filters come right apart like this. They're just held on by these plastic clamps. See, there's a bunch of debris. So I'm going to wash this stuff out here in the garage with parts cleaner, and then this we'll just wash down with soapy water. This is totally dry, so it's not an oiled unit. So we'll wash it down with soapy water, get it all dry, and then put it back in the bike. Alright, so we got everything back together, but now we got to redo the fueling system. So the fuel pump's not going to move anymore. It's going to stay exactly where it is. But we're actually going to have to convert, because this is the old fuel filter, and this is the new 3/8 fuel filter that I got. So we're going to have to convert this. We're going to put it in line with the gas tank so it drops down, and we're basically going to redo all the lines. Now, what I do is I actually buy this 3/8 fuel line in 25-foot rolls online because it's cheaper, and allows me to remake all of the individual fuel lines with new hose, so I never have to worry about them. Alright, so here's our setup. We got our fuel pump right here, our new fuel filter here. This is the fuel hose that will run up to the gas tank. This is the fuel line that runs up to the carburetors. I drained all the oiled gas into a gas can. We're going to put the tank on, then we're going to fill up with fresh gas, and hopefully this bike's going to fire right up. Alright, well the clip-ons finally came in after a month, so finally get back to doing this. As you can see, I got kind of a janky setup between a rear stand and a mid jack here. Really, you want to do this on a front stand, a nose stand, so you can get the wheel up in the air. But what you want to do is you want to just hammer these forks down like this until you can slide the old clip-on off. And what we're actually going to do is, because I'm lazy, I'm actually just going to replace this holder part on the clip-on. Because that way we don't have to take all of the controls and stuff off. We can just keep the shaft as it is. So once you get these far enough down that you can slide the clip-ons off, that's all you really need. And we can put the new ones in place. Right here, you can see that they're basically, the caps are flush. I'm going to hammer them down a little bit and tighten this screw right here. And then we will set the clip-ons right up underneath them. There we go. Clip-ons installed, and we'll rearrange some of this stuff and move around a little bit later, but basically I wanted to make sure that I could have a nice wide grip so it's not hitting anything. So now we can lower it off this death trap that's holding it. One other thing that's broken on this bike is this is the master cylinder, and this plastic piece right here is broken off. So I ordered all new pieces and all new seals and stuff. So we're just going to replace this so we can get the front brakes working again. So the first thing you want to do is you want to pop this off, and it just comes right out. And then this is the new piece that actually sits like this. As you can see in there, it's just held in with a pair of C-clip pliers, or needle nose, or what are they called? C-clip and little needle nose pliers and stuff. And I'll just show you guys in a second. We'll pop it right out. These are the pliers I was talking about, and the way they work is you want to squeeze this in here, and then as we compress, it's going to compress this this O-ring and allow us to remove it. And these are not great. I really don't like them, and that's why stuff pops out. But now we should be able to just get a pair of pliers to pull this out, and then I got a new O-ring that backs it up. And as you can see, there's a crap ton of gunk in there. There is the O-ring we will be replacing as well. So I'm actually going to clean this out and then reassemble it. Now that we've got this all clean, what we're going to do is we're going to put in our new O-ring, which just kind of sits right down in there. And really don't want to be using a knife to seat an O-ring, but I'm lazy to go and get a proper screwdriver. Or a pick or something, so we're just gonna Get that seated in there properly. And then this also faces this direction, and then this just gets seated down in there onto the O-ring like that. Then this guy gets pushed on like this and like that, and then we will actually force this down a little further, but that's basically the gist of it, and then you can just reassemble it back onto the bike. So the brakes on this bike were totally dry, the whole system was open to the air, and there's a couple of different ways of filling it up. If you're fancy and pricey, you can get a pressure bleeder that forces fluid down into the brakes. A little cheaper, you can get a vacuum bleeder that actually hooks up to the opening on the caliper when you bleed and sucks fluid down. Or if you're lazy like me, you can just sit here and do this. Just keep pumping the master cylinder and periodically opening the brakes, and eventually pressure will build, and you just keep putting fluid in here. And eventually pressure will build, and as you can see it's already starting to build, and then we'll release down there, and then you just bleed the brakes like you normally would. And when they've been open like this, a lot of moisture gets in there, so it's pretty nasty. So I like to basically flush the whole system. I'll keep bleeding it until nothing but clear fluid comes out of both calipers. And then we will do the rear brake, and I believe that should be about it. We should be able to put all the plastic fairings and stuff back on and be ready to rock. Well, there she is, guys. All that's left to do now is clean her up, take some pictures, and get the bike listed for sale. As you can see, the tail section does not match up at all. The tires are bald, fairings are trashed, but she runs and drives pretty good. I took her for a little spin through the neighborhood without any issues. I ended up removing the fuel pump entirely and just bypassing the whole unit because the fuel pump was running all the time and I don't know why. Front brakes work great, front suspension is okay, it's a little soft, but you know, whatever. And so we'll take some pictures and we'll get this bike listed. Thanks, guys.